Hello everybody, I am Brian P. Easton, the author of the autobiography of a werewolf hunter series. Welcome to the Werewolf Bar.
Oh, if I had a dollar bill, yes, I believe I surely will. Go to town and drink my fill early in the morning. Little darling, she's a red thing, man, she makes my legs to sing. Wanna buy a diamond ring?
Thanks for coming by tonight for your September edition of Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. I hope you're getting the most from our last days of summer and are ready for Halloween season because it's coming up pretty quick. The stores certainly seem to think so, and I swear they put out their spooky season merchandise earlier and earlier every year, which is okay with me. Got a few items to share with you tonight. As you may have heard by now, we have finally gotten our Winter Fox Journals Book 2 audiobook straightened out, and it's available for download. That's the new corrected version of that. And you'll find links to it and everything else that we have to talk about tonight in the description down below. As far as new business goes, Basil Sands has now been slated to narrate both volumes of the Legends of the Werewolf Hunter anthology, volumes 1 and 2, and that's going to be on his schedule to begin next month. We're hoping to have the first volume ready for you at least by Christmas, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes with Basil's schedule. Also, that pictorial project that I've been talking about for a while is available right now on Kindle and in print, both as hardcover and paperback editions. It's essentially a picture book companion to the autobiography of a werewolf hunter series that starts with the very first book and goes all the way through the Winter Fox Journals Book 2, which is where we are now with the series. So if you've ever wanted to see the Werewolf Hunter and Company illustrated, be sure to pick up a copy in the format of your choice. We're also putting together a similar but more whimsical project, which imagines the Werewolf Bar as just that, a kind of a 1930s Prohibition era speakeasy, which is specifically designed with werewolves in mind as clientele. It's a fun little thing we've been putting together, and I think you'll get a kick out of it too. We should have that one together well before Halloween next month. But it will be Kindle download only. It's not quite beefy enough to make it into print. Also, to be sure to check out our Monster Hunter Quarterly editions that we have available. Well, there are 3 up there now, and another one's in the works. And when we get that 4th one done, we're going to try to roll all of those together to a print edition as kind of an omnibus or a best of annual type of a magazine. And as you've heard me say before, this magazine, Monster Hunter Quarterly, purports to be a periodical that ran from 1890 all the way through 1990. So we've got a century to play with there, and we hope you enjoy what we've done as much as we've enjoyed putting it together. Well, I think most of us subscribe to a streaming service of some kind, maybe even more than one. Netflix, of course, seems to be the most widely used. It's kind of leading the pack, I think, as far as streaming services go. And so I want to share with you a series that I found recently added to Netflix and that became available from AMC on the Netflix platform. It's called The Terror. And like I said, it's from AMC, the people who brought you The Walking Dead, and it's a period piece that imagines the fate of the real-life Franklin expedition, which disappeared in the Arctic around 1845 while trying to navigate the last piece of the Northwest Passage. Now, the ships in this expedition were the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, from which the series gets its name. So that's from the first season of The Terror in 2018, and honestly the only one that I have seen. So I can't speak to the seasons which follow, but I understand there have been 2 more since then. Regardless, the first one works well, stands alone, all on its own, and when I first started watching it, I began to suspect that it was going to be a fairly straightforward piece about speculative history, a kind of a best guess recreation of what happened to that lost British expedition. And let me say, I enjoyed it even then. But as I continued watching, and let me just say, it's not one of those that people will tell you, oh, keep watching, it gets better. No, this one was good right at flagfall. But as the episodes continued, I began to see that we were headed in a different kind of direction with this. And it wasn't just historical conjecture. Now, The Terror is as well cast, well directed, and well acted as any period thriller or drama I've ever seen. I'd compare it to the likes of The Revenant and the series Northwater, also from AMC, if you've seen that one. But at the heart of The Terror, amidst the first-rate performances and great cinematography, there lives a monster. It's a monster movie, or a series in this case, and it's a monster we've never seen before, which makes the series not only multi-genre, but original. Now, I'll say no more lest I spoil it or hype it up too much, but the Werewolf Bar recommends that you give The Terror a watch on Netflix. Well, we're glad to have Dr. T. Broussard back with us tonight. A couple of months back, I had referenced a news article out of Mexico where a self-proclaimed witch had been killed after trying to abduct a toddler for ritual sacrifice. Now, the article surrounded the cult of Santa Muerte, Holy Death, in its narco-culture form, its criminal form. So Doc is here to tell us a little bit more about this very popular folk saint and the larger subject of Santeria, which surrounds it. Now, Santeria, as you may know, is a syncretic religion, much like Vodun, but it has its roots in Cuba rather than Haiti. So here's Dr. T and Doc Talk Shop.
Hello and welcome to Doc Talk Shop as part of Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Tonight, we are returning to the realms of the African diaspora and their influence on spirituality in the New World. Tonight, we'll be talking about Santeria, the cult of Santa Muerte, their connections to both Brujeria, which is Mexican witchcraft, and to the connection between witchcraft or Brujeria and so-called narco culture. Now, briefly, Santeria is a specific cult, if you will, a group of a body of knowledge from a region in Africa known as Yoruba, specifically. They have many practices and beliefs that cross over with what most people would think of as Vodun, but whereas Vodun speaks of Loa, Santeria speaks of the Orisha, and much like Vodun, Santerians associate their Orisha with Catholic saints, Catholic iconography, and in some cases, they revere the same spirits, but whereas Vodun incorporated a lot of French occultism and the use of the French language via Creole, Santeria became associated with South America, Mexico, Latin America, and so you have more Spanish tones. But importantly, between Voodoo and Santeria, you have the examples of the Loa Legba, who opens the way between worlds, and then you have in Santeria the Orisha Ilegua, and in Granada, the same Legba or Ilegua is also known as Shu. So you have a threefold crossover, and if you look at the entities, they are in many ways identical but different. For example, Ilegua in Santeria is pictured as a child that opens the way, and Legba in Voodoo is often represented as an old man who opens the way. So you have similarity and you have differences. Now, within the overall paradigm of the African diaspora, which most people would call voodoo or voodoo, Santeria is considered the nation of spirits connected most to the earth element and with the direction of west. And those spirits are really their own thing, and that's why the Aruban practices are really considered a separate religio-magical practice. They have their own priesthoods and their own hierarchies, their own feast days, but there are things that cross over which make them part of the overall African diaspora. Now, within that diaspora, in Santeria, you will often find, specifically in Cuba, connection between Santeria and the Abaquá or leper people. For example, going back to an earlier discussion, within this greater milieu of the African diaspora religions, specifically in Santeria, you will often have the intersection between it, the church, and the folk saints that people come to venerate, which are local saints, local spirits, often giving saints makeover and made into a kind of spirit. Now, one of these folk saints, much as Brian said, is Santeria, Santa Muerte, and she primarily is a form of the Grim Reaper that is conflated somewhat with aspects of the Virgin Mary. Now, the actual history of Santa Muerte, much like Brian said, is fairly recent. She's a thought form, a personification of death that some people have tried to link to various South American deities, but essentially she's an embodiment of grief and mourning that people came to honor, and different avatars of Holy Death are associated with different colors and are honored or prayers said for different things. For example, if you have a pink avatar, Santa Muerte, it's about love. If you have a red one, it's about passion or anger. A black one is about mourning, grief, or cause of death or illness. Yellow is often used for communication. Green is for money. Now, I am in a minority of people that believe that Santa Muerte is best understood as a kind of a thought form, not a spirit with a great history going back into time, but something people's collective belief created, as a way of dealing with their grief. They personified it and communicated with it, and they made it into a thing. And as often is the case, something positive, which is what that thought form was intended to be, became something negative, or a form of it became negative. And that form, a negative Santa Muerte, became associated with narco culture, the culture that arose around narcotics dealing and other kinds of criminal activity. Originally, it was for the scare tactics. They wanted people to believe that the cartels were protected by black magic. Some of the cartels do, in fact, employ witches or brujos of various kinds. Sometimes they will employ santeros that have gone astray. Most legitimate practitioners of Santeria and other religio-magical systems are not going to work for a cartel because, for one thing, if you mess up, it's your head that goes into the pot for the next guy they hire. Okay, so with that in mind, the Santa Muerte of the cartels is not part of the devotional that some people have, or the legitimate, or at least the positive holy death. The holy death of the cartels is a holy, malevolent figure. It is used to inspire fear and control others, and it's often associated with other figures like Jesus Malverde or El Cristo Negro, were also two negative figures to imply that the cartels have power and protection. Fear is what the cartels are all about, because fear saves them the resource of bullets and things like that. All that being said, some cartels do actually get into what I would call legitimate black magic or brujeria. They will employ people, as was seen in Metamoros, to kill people and gain power that way, gain protection that way. But the main part, cartels' use of things like holy deaths and other kinds of witchcraft are mainly ways of disguising what they do as a religious thing or to control population. Few of them actually believe in what they're doing. Those that do actually believe in whatever they're doing are very dangerous because they not only are utterly directed in psychological terms, they are without a moral hindrance to doing terrible things in the name of what they believe in. So these narco cults will find horrendous crime scenes. There's a gang known as MS-13 that is known to kidnap children and offer them up to various entities. MS-13 is a street gang essentially, but they are known to raise altars ostensibly to some kind of satanic figure, which one depends on what aspect of the gang you're dealing with, so I can't really speak to that. As to Holy Death, I want to reiterate, at best, it's a positive thought form of grief and sorrow turned to a productive use. At worst, it's a thought form of malevolence that bad people use to get over on weak people. There are those that see Santa Muerte itself as malignant or satanic. I don't think it is, at least in its original conception. I also do not believe it is, as I said before, an older spirit. It's not connected to any of the Orisha from Aruba, although you can tangentially connect it with a lot of the death worship in Latin America, because the worship of death, the worship of the underworld, Catholic rites were very big in that part of the world. So you could almost call the origin of Holy Death a memory of those past cults, repackaging, if you will, the same way a lot of the iconography of ISIS was repurposed for the Virgin Mary. I'm not saying that the Virgin Mary is ISIS, but I'm saying that the artists took a lot of ISIS symbology and they moved it over to depictions of Mary. In much the same way, you have a reaper typically shown with a rosary wearing the uniform, if you will, of the Virgin Mary. You also see aspects of this figure in the various evil nun movies in popular culture. When you see Holy Death in popular culture, it is mainly pictured as being negative because the cartels that abused it and made it so. And on that note, I will mention that in my time in learning what I learned in South America, I was offered a lot of money by persons that made suggestive statements to me that they might have been involved in things that I would find morally objectionable. They offered me a great deal of money, but I would not accept that money, although I refused very politely, and I gave very logical reasons why I could not do what they asked. There was no reason for me to make an inmate, but I didn't have to. I don't know if those people were criminals of some kind or not, but the circumstances were sketchy enough for me to be nervous. So I dealt with it as I felt appropriate. So just to go back for a moment, Santeria literally means the worship of saints. And I honestly believe it's a name Santa Muerte, or Holy Death, that gets Santa Muerte associated with Santeria, when in fact, she really is not. She's not among the Orisha, she's not among the Loa, or any of the other African diaspora paradigms. You know, and while there are some Loa and some Orisha that you could make into aspects of Santa Muerte, possibly you'd be stretching the facts a great deal. So, in my opinion, the Santa Muerte of the narco cult is really a mascot for what they're selling, which is death and fear. It's a negative thought form, and I really wish they would come up with their own name for it, because it's a very different character than the Holy Death that some perform devotions to get over grief and things like that. Now, Ryan brought up the idea that he didn't want to make any confusion about what the news report he was reading about called a witch and people like Wiccans, other kinds of occultists, even traditional witches or Sabbatic witches in European traditions in Maine are not malignant at all, at least in the modern expressions of those things. However, in South America, the term brujo for a male or bruja for a female, depending on how it's pronounced, have a very malignant connotation. So brujeria is, in a sense, the black magic to the white magic of Santeria. So you have the way of the saints, Santeria, and then you have brujeria, the way of the witch. And as with other things, who is what depends on who's talking and what they know. And there are people that accuse legitimate Santerians of being brujos and vice versa. So, as with many things in this realm, there's a lot of subjectivity. I feel it's important that those interested in these things don't take their knowledge from things like films or fiction books, because the intent may be sincere, but the information is often wrong. Even if the author does research, the filmmaker, the research will be altered to suit the intent of the film. So you're going to find all of these things usually negatively represented in a film, if it's a horror film. For example, a good movie that shows the contrast between Santeria and another practice known as Palomayambe is called Believers. And in that movie, while Santeria is assumed to be largely positive, both it and Palomayambe are shown or suggested to be negative because of the skulls and the animal parts used in the rituals. A lot of the horror attributed to these things stems from the fact that they use the imagery of death, they use the parts of animals and people and things to represent things, whereas the main body of the culture would not. So these things appear evil because we don't like skulls, we don't like body parts. We think of death as something ugly. So we see a reaper, we become turned off. Whereas in other cultures, skulls and bones and things are seen as a way of contacting the sacred. Very similar to how Catholics have issues with Halloween, but they will go on full knees to kiss the bone of a saint if that bone is from a reliquary approved by Rome. So again, it's in the eye of the beholder. I hope that's a good introduction. Now, the specific case that Brian spoke of made very clear that this was a self-styled witch. We don't know what tradition she really claimed, whether she was a brujo, whether she was Santeria gone bad, or a palo, or what she was doing. Now, the fact that incest was supposedly involved in this indicates that if she was in any tradition, it would be in one of the darker traditions out there, which would also have her gravitate toward working for the cartels. People like this, they're either doing it to make money and they don't really believe, or if they believe, they still want to make money. It's a lust for power kind of thing. And in this particular case, you see the result of that. If she was in fact a witch, this person was dealt with the way witches of that type often are. They are hoisted by their own petard, essentially. I hope you found this enlightening. So, careful which saints you call on. Always recognize that belief is a very personal thing, very subjective, and as always, mind the moon.
I appreciate Dr. Broussard mentioning how MS-13 and the drug cartels often use Santa Muerte and or black magic as an instrument of terror. Such tactics bringing to mind, since we mentioned voodoo, the Duvalier regime of Haiti during the last century. Francois Duvalier, aka Papa Doc, ruled Haiti from 1957 to 71. And then his son, Jean-Claude Duvalier, aka Baby Doc, who ruled until 1986 when he had to make a run for it. They had a paramilitary secret police force called the Tonton Macoute, which is named after the Haitian boogeyman, Uncle Gunny Sack, they call him, who kidnaps bad children and stuffs them down in his sack. And so they've been using religious terror to control populations for a long, long time, and not just in the Caribbean and not just in the Americas, but in Europe, Africa, and Asia as well. So I also enjoyed the fact that Doc mentioned the fact that he kind of looked at Santa Muerte as a thought form. Now, thought form is in Western spiritualism, notably theosophy, equates to an actual manifestation of someone's or a group of someone's emotions or ideas. It comes from Tibetan Buddhism, from what they call tulpa, Tulpa. And they're materialized beings, these tulpas, most of the time, that usually take a human form. Now, I don't want to get too much in the weeds with this because there's a lot to talk about when we start to unpack it. But think of it as an imaginary friend who comes to life, even though they by no means and needn't always be friendly. For instance, the Slender Man of internet creepypasta fame is sometimes thought to be a tulpa or a thought form. It's a fascinating topic we've really not touched on much here before, though the concept is relevant to my series. We may have more to say about that down the road. As always, I want to thank Dr. T for taking the time to be with us and share his knowledge. I never cease to appreciate his intellect and sagacity. So with that, we come to the end of another episode. Let me remind you again that all the links for everything to do with Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter is listed down in the description below, including my website, werewolfhunter.com, my Facebook page, and of course the book series and all of its heirs and descendants. Many thanks for stopping by the Werewolf Bar tonight. We hope to see you again next month and celebrate Halloween with you. Until then, I wish you happy hunting and remind you to mind the moon.